After he was gone, Hannah Rogers, one of the neighbours, came in and wanted me to help her to wash. I telled her I couldn't just then, for I hadn't set on the potatoes for the dinner, nor washed up the breakfast stuff yet. So then she began a-calling me for my nasty idle ways. I was a little bit vexed at first, but I never said nothing wrong to her. I only telled her like all in a quiet way, and I'd had the new parson to see me, but I'd get done as quick as ever I could, and then come and help her. So then she softened down, and my heart like as it warmed towards her, and in a bit we was very good friends. And so it is, Miss Grey, a soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger. It isn't only in them you speak to, but in yourself. Very true, Nancy, if we could always remember it. Aye, if we could. And did Mr. Weston ever come to see you again? Yes, many a time, and since my eyes has been so bad, he's sat and read to me by the half-hour together. But you know, miss, he has other folks to see, and other things to do, God bless him. And that next Sunday he preached such a sermon. His text was, Come unto me, all ye that labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest, and them 2 blessed verses that follows. You wasn't there, miss, you was with your friends then, but it made me so happy, and I am happy now, thank God, and I take a pleasure now in doing little bits of jobs for my neighbours, such as the poor old body that's half-blind can do, and they take it kindly of me, just as he said. You see, miss, I'm knitting a pair of stockings now. They're for Thomas Jackson. He's a queerish old body, and we've had many about at threepin, one and at the other, and at times we've differed sorely. So I thought I couldn't do no better nor knit him a pair of warm stockings, and I've felt to like him a deal better, poor old man, since I began. It's turned out just as Master Weston said. Well, I'm very glad to see you so happy, Nancy, and so wise, but I must go now. I shall be wanted at the Hall, said I, and bidding her good-bye, I departed, promising to come again when I had time, and feeling nearly as happy as herself. And another time I went to read to a poor labourer who was in the last stage of consumption. The young ladies had been to see him, and somehow a promise of reading had been extracted from them, but it was too much trouble, so they begged me to do it instead. I went, willingly enough, and there too I was gratified with the praises of Mr. Weston, both from the sick man and his wife. The former told me that he derived great comfort and benefit from the visits of the new parson, who frequently came to see him, and was another guest sort of man to Mr. Hatfield, who, before the other's arrival at Horton, had now and then paid him a visit, on which occasions he would always insist upon having the cottage door kept open to administer the fresh air for his own convenience, without considering how it might injure the sufferer, and having opened his prayer-book and hastily read over a part of the service for the sick, would hurry away again, if he did not stay to administer some harsh rebuke to the afflicted wife, or to make some thoughtless, not to say heartless, observation, rather calculated to increase than diminish the troubles of the suffering pair. Whereas, said the man, Master Weston'll pray with me quite in a different fashion, and talk to me as kind as ought, and oft read to me too, and sit beside me just like a brother. Just for all the world, exclaimed his wife. And about 3 weeks in, when he seed how poor Jem shivered with cold, and what pitiful fires we kept, he asked if our stock of coals was nearly done. I telled him it was, and we was ill set to get more, but you know, Mum, I didn't think o' him helping us. But, howsever, he sent us a sack of coals next day, and we've had good fires ever sin, and a great blessing it is this winter time. But that's his way, Miss Grey. When he comes into a poor body's house a seeing sick folk, he like notices what they must stand in need on, and if he thinks they can't readily get it theirselves, he never says naught about it, but just gets it for 'em. And it isn't everybody 'at do that, 'at has as little as he has, for you know, Mum, he's not at all to live on but what he gets from the rector, and that's little enough, they say. I remembered then, with a species of exultation, that he had been frequently styled a vulgar brute by the amiable Miss Murray, because he wore a silver watch, and clothes not quite so bright and fresh as Mr. Hatfield's. In returning to the lodge I felt very happy, and thanked God that I now had something to think about, something to dwell on as a relief from the weary monotony, the lonely drudgery of my present life. For I was lonely. Never, from month to month, from year to year, except during my brief intervals of rest at home, did I see one creature to whom I can open my heart, or freely speak my thoughts with any hope of sympathy, or even comprehension. Never one, unless it were poor Nancy Brown, with whom I could enjoy a single moment of real social intercourse, or whose conversation was calculated to render me better, wiser, or happier than before, or who, as far as I could see, could be greatly benefited by mine. My only companions had been unamiable children and ignorant, wrong-headed girls. from whose fatiguing folly unbroken solitude was often a relief most earnestly desired and dearly prized. But to be restricted to such associates was a serious evil, both in its immediate effects and the consequences that were likely to ensue. Never a new idea or stirring thought came to me from without, and such as rose within me were, for the most part, miserably crushed at once, or doomed to sicken or fade away, because they could not see the light. Habitual associates are known to exercise a great influence over each other's minds and manners. Those whose actions are forever before our eyes, whose words are ever in our ears, will naturally lead us, albeit against our will, slowly, gradually, imperceptibly perhaps, to act and speak as they do. I will not presume to say how far this irresistible power of assimilation extends, but if one civilized man were doomed to pass a dozen years amid a race of intractable savages, unless he had power to improve them, I greatly question whether, at the close of that period, he would not have become, at least, a barbarian himself. And I, as I could not make my young companions better, feared exceedingly that they would make me worse, would gradually bring my feelings, habits, capacities to the level of their own, without, however, imparting to me their light-heartedness and cheerful vivacity. Already I seemed to feel my intellect deteriorating, my heart petrifying, my soul contracting, and I trembled lest my very moral perceptions should become deadened, my distinctions of right and wrong confounded, and all my better faculties be sunk, at last, beneath the baneful influence of such a mode of life. The gross vapours of earth were gathering around me, enclosing in upon my inward heaven, and thus it was that Mr. Weston rose at length upon me, appearing like the morning star in my horizon, to save me from the fear of utter darkness, and I rejoiced that I had now a subject for contemplation that was above me, not beneath. I was glad to see that all the world was not made up of Bloomfields, Murrays, Hatfields, Ashbys, etc., and that human excellence was not a mere dream of the imagination. When we hear a little good and no harm of a person, it is easy and pleasant to imagine more. In short, it is needless to analyze all my thoughts, but Sunday was now become a day of peculiar delight to me. I was now almost broken into the back corner of the carriage, for I liked to hear him, and I liked to see him too, though I knew he was not handsome, or even what is called agreeable in outward aspect, but certainly he was not ugly. In stature he was a very little, above the middle size. The outline of his face would be pronounced too square for beauty, but to me it announced decision of character. His dark hair was not carefully curled, like Mr. Hatfield's, but simply brushed aside over a broad white forehead. The eyebrows, I suppose, were too projecting, but from under those dark brows there gleamed an eye of singular power, brown in colour, not large, and somewhat deep-set, but strikingly brilliant and full of expression. There was character, too, in the mouth, something that bespoke a man of firm purpose and a habitual thinker, and when he smiled—but I will not speak of that yet, for, at the time I mention, I had never seen him smile, and, indeed, his general appearance did not impress me with the idea of a man given to such a relaxation, nor of such an individual as the cottagers described him. I had early formed my opinion of him, and, in spite of Miss Murray's objurgations, was fully convinced that he was a man of strong sense, firm faith, and ardent piety, but thoughtful and stern. And when I found that, to his other good qualities, was added that of true benevolence and gentle, considerate kindness, the discovery, perhaps, delighted me the more, as I had not been prepared to expect it. End of Chapter 11.